Introduce myself. Hello, I'm Sally Handley, author of the Holly and Ivy Cozy Mystery Series, and I'm here today with Bill Powers, an investigator and an educator. Uh, Bill is right now retired from active law enforcement, but he is an instructor at police academies and advises on special investigations. So, without further ado, Bill, why don't you tell us a little bit about your long career in law enforcement?
Certainly, Sally, and thank you for having me on. This is it's kind of exciting to be part of this with you. My career goes back to my law enforcement career goes back to 1974 when I was accepted into the Massachusetts State Police Academy in June. I'm the second oldest of six. My father was a Boston police officer and detective, and all I ever wanted to be since I was old enough to know what I wanted to be was I wanted to follow in his footsteps. And while my career path was different in that he was a Boston police officer and I was a state trooper, it gave me that sort of commonality with my dad, which was something really, really special through the years. And I knew him I knew him. When he was a patrol officer, I watched the way he dealt with people, and he just had a style about him, and I loved it, and because he was earnest and honest with everybody. And then he went into detectives and he headed up a unit that primarily did organized crime. And at a time when we had an organized crime war going on. So I was fascinated by all that. And again, just all I wanted to do was follow in his footsteps. And I was never a good student, and I didn't care to be a good student because I didn't think you had to be that smart to be a police officer. And it wasn't until I went into the academy and learned very quickly, you got to be pretty smart. You know what I mean? If you're going to be good at what you do, because you're going to go to court every day, you're going to enforce the laws, but that's not the rough and tumble world that everybody thinks we have every day from watching TV. There's a lot. It's more, especially in investigations, it's far more mental than it is physical, and it's wearing. And if you're not prepared for it, you're in the wrong profession. You know. So I was fortunate. I got assigned out of the academy to the busiest barracks in the state. So becoming an investigator while still in uniform was something that I pursued. And on a chance meeting that my father had one afternoon with the lieutenant colonel who was in charge of investigations on the state police, the colonel said to my father, "Does your son have any interest in being a detective?" My father called me up, woke me up because I worked midnights, and said, "Hey, they want to know if ever thought about being a detective." I said, "Yeah, I'd love to be." I fell back to sleep. 2 hours later, I got a call saying you've been transferred to the major crime unit.
Oh,
So
wow.
it doesn't work that way anymore, but that's the way it used to work, right? So in 1977, as a 25-year-old kid, I found myself as a detective. So, and then from that, there's a million little side stories in there, but that turned into a career as a homicide investigator. But it also brought me back to school and finished up my degree at night because I quit to go in the academy. And then I went on to law school because I felt that, not that I
Wow.
wanted to be in a courtroom practicing every day, but I was going to be in a courtroom every day testifying and preparing cases. And if I was going to have a better career, that I needed to go that route. So back in the 1980, 1984, I went to law school, and that sort of sidetracked my homicide investigator career because they made me the legal instructor at the academy. And I did that for 6 years and then went back into homicide for the next 15 or so.
Wow. Wow.
I've been blessed. Been really blessed.
So, how did you decide to start writing?
So, it's in my blood. It's in my family. If I came from a family of tradesmen, I'd probably do my own plumbing and do my own electricity. I'm not. I don't understand it. I bring in a guy. But writing, my mother was actually a tremendous writer, but she was not an author. My aunt, her younger sister, was an editor and writer for Ellery Queen and Alfred Hitchcock magazine. She was the when she retired, she was the managing editor of both. My uncle was a sports writer, and my older brother, who went a little bit sideways, became a writer for a Boston newspaper, and he still is writing 52 years later. And so there was a comfort zone in there that I wasn't afraid to try to write. And when I was at the academy, when I was the legal instructor, I also was elected to secretary of our union. We had a very vibrant, robust newspaper at the time, and that position made me the editor of that. So I had to learn all about that, but I also had to write. And I did mostly writing on legal issues that affected all of us. and sort of breaking them down from the legal point, like learning the rules of the game, and then how we apply our investigations based on understanding the rules of the game. So I was kind of comfortable with that. And the reality is, when it was time to write the book, that base of knowledge for me made it easier to be able to step into it. I'm not saying it was easy to write the book at all, but it made it easier for me to decide to pursue it.
I see. So you got the police side, the law enforcement side from your father, and the writing side from your mother,
yep.
and others in your
and
family.
family.
Very interesting. Yep. Very interesting. Well, today we're talking about your book, When the Smoke Cleared. And I want you to describe for people what writers call the inciting incident. What is it, that forms the basis of the crime that you write all about in this book?
So it was one of those summer mornings, and the fire alarm went off at a condominium complex and emptied out the building. There was heavy smoke that was starting to rise up, and the fire department showed up. And the good news was they had a fire suppression system that put the fire out relatively quickly, flooded the whole place, but it still was filled with black acrid smoke. That gave the fire chief the impression, from his base of knowledge from learning about fires, that this was pretty likely an arson. And as the smoke cleared, that's the name, and the water started to recede, it became obvious to them that this was more than just a fire. It looked as though the fire was used to cover up evidence of another crime. So they contacted the police department, and their arson investigator and detectives came to the scene. They took a look. They immediately contacted the fire marshal's office, which is staffed by state police, to bring them in and their arson dog, and they commenced an investigation into an arson. But once the water receded, it became, again, more obvious that there had been a struggle and a fight, and there were bloodstains on the floor. There was blood smears on the wall. So we knew that this was more than, they knew that this was more than just that. Because of the camaraderie between my unit and others like mine, but with the local police, they immediately said, we got to call the homicide guys to come in and work with us. So as a team, it was the Malden police, the fire marshal's office, and the state police from the DA's office that started to investigate the case. So that's where we got started. And the reason for that is, and we've always emphasized this, is if it looks like it might be a homicide, we need to start working on it today. Otherwise, we lose all that evidence. And if it turns out a month from now, boy, that was a homicide, we don't have it. We don't have that evidence. So we're very quick, and still remain that way, to jump on a case as quickly as we can. And what makes this case interesting, well, everything about this case is interesting, but at the end of the day, we had a person of interest, we had a crime scene, we had no victim, we had no weapon, we had no motive. We had nothing, but we had something that we knew was going to lead us somewhere. And that was a long, tedious investigation that we took on as a homicide case. And it wasn't for several months later that we were able to give it meaning, if you will, when the remains were recovered.
Your book, which reads as suspensefully as any mystery I've ever read, even though I kind of knew that there had to be a good outcome at the end, it really is very gripping, especially since, as you said, you just outlined the challenges of this case and then how it progressed from there. What amazed me in reading this book is the colossal effort it takes on behalf of so many people to go from a crime scene to a conviction.
Yes.
So at the end of the book, you say this case is a clear and ringing example of what right looks like for police and prosecutors. Talk about that.
So it's a term that I picked up when I was the commandant of the training academy from a couple of the guys that I worked with. That what we do is we teach or we train so that they know what right looks like. So and what it simply means is if we teach the right way and we learn all, so we teach the rules of the game, if you will, the legal stuff, and then we get into the investigative process and the way to do that right so that you stay within the parameters of the law and you don't run afoul and mess up a search or a search warrant and all that kind of stuff. And then you use your thinking process, work together with everybody else. And at the end of the day, for example, when the academy graduates, they should know what right looks like. So if they go out and they make mistakes, it's not because they weren't trained well. So in this book, I lay it out from the moment the fire department got the call all the way up through the very end of the trial. And in that, as you said, it's very complex. I think at the end of the day, we had 48 witnesses that had to testify, and they came from all different, from all the people I just mentioned, to the chemist, to the biologist, to the forensic anthropologist, to the odontologist, all of these people that all become part of an investigation. And, we've mentioned it before, and I do mention in the book about lone wolves, that it's not a job where individuals come out like they do on TV and in the movies and books and solve it all on their own. It is a collaborative effort. It's a colossal collaborative effort. But at the end of the day, it's the greatest feeling in the world when you have a jury say guilty. And everybody that took that stand, everybody that worked on this case was a huge part of that. And for my perspective, and I say this to people all the time, it isn't about the salary, it isn't about the rank, it isn't about any of that. It's about the look on the faces of a family when a jury comes back with a guilty finding and they turn to you and you get a hug. I'll give you my year's salary for those hugs, because you know that your work was validated on behalf of the victim, on behalf of the victim's family. And that's why I also refer to the book as a love story, because the victim in this case, had a very difficult life. And her family could have done a lot of different things and completely fallen apart. And they did the exact opposite. And they grew stronger, and they remain strong now, almost 25 years later. Great family. But you come out of a tough neighborhood and some real tough conditions, but they made it work. And when you see that, again, it's makes it all worthwhile.
I think the one of the most heartfelt moments is when you describe the jury coming to talk to you guys after the trial. That had to be very moving for you all.
I'm going to tell you that I've probably talked about this case, whether in a classroom with all my peers, or in delivering a talk in one place or another. You tested me here, because I can't get through it without tearing up, because nobody's ever seen that before. I have not talked to anybody anywhere that's ever seen this. And what happened, to go back to what you're saying, we get a knock on the door after the verdict came back, and we were downstairs in my office. And I opened the door for Adrienne Lynch, who was the DA on the case, and all the jurors were standing there clapping and cheering for her.
That it was an amazing story, and I cannot advise people listening enough to go and read the book, because it really is an amazing story. Now, one of the things you say at the very beginning of your book is that homicide detectives differ from other professionals. How are they different?
That's a real good question, and I think I'll talk about it, but I think people need to think through their own backgrounds and things and see what I mean when I say it's different. Essentially, you're on duty 24 hours a day, because homicides don't usually happen at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They usually happen at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're up and out. So you need to embrace that and understand that that's the way it goes. And depending on family situations, it makes a big play as to whether your family's on board with you being away for a couple of days at a time on occasion. You have to, crime scenes, you need to make sure they're preserved and protected. And they are what they are. And I'm not being, offhanded here, but after a while, a dead body on the floor is a dead body on the floor, right? It's not about that. It's about then turning to the families and explaining things to the families and working with the families and being empathetic. And that's real hard to do for people. And at the same time, you need to be churning forward on this, not missing a witness, not conducting a search without a search warrant when you needed one, not interrogating someone without advising them on Miranda, not doing an eyewitness identification without following the new procedures. So there's all of these things that are churning that must be done correctly. And that, quite honestly, in my role as the detective lieutenant, you spend less time being the interviewer, which is what you want to do, but you can't. That's what those guys do, as you once did. But just making sure that all of the things, the T's are being crossed and the I's are being dotted, so that when you put a case together working with the district attorney, not as opposed to the district attorney, that you've put together a case that you can put before a jury. And so there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of late nights, a lot of mental angst over things. I've had many cases that have me out walking along the boulevard at 1 o'clock in the morning, trying to deal with a setback and prepare to go forward and never just take no as an answer, to get to the bottom of it. And it's at the same time, it's the understanding that we aren't defined as a fact. That's what juries do. We are the gatherers of information. So, and so that if done well and done right, maybe it exonerates the person, which is good because you're not trying to convict a guilty person, an innocent person. But on the other hand, if you let things slip by out of laziness, out of not paying attention, then at the end of the day, you're going to pay dearly for that. You know what I mean? So I just see it. And again, it's not a knock on any other profession. Certainly doctors open people up and do really complex things. And so I'm not saying different, but it's the same. And I think I describe it in the book that, you're usually eating off the dollar menu at McDonald's because you're probably going to puke it up an hour later because you're standing in a fetid dumpster looking for evidence of a crime. And it's all true. And if you're the boss, you better be the first one in the dumpster or nobody's going to follow you. So there's all of those kind of things. It's building the camaraderie with everybody. And again, I wouldn't trade a day of my career. It's the reason at my advanced age, I am still involved in the training because I just want to be part of it.
What you're describing, there were so many pieces and so many people. So for example, if that one detective hadn't been monitoring missing persons reports in other places, I don't want to give any of the most suspenseful stuff away, but there were just chance also play. That's the thing with all this work and all this concentrated effort. Chance has to be with you. Luck has to be with you for you to uncover certain things. And that was definitely a part of the story. So, Bill, with all that said, with this book done, what are you working on now?
Yeah, honestly, I'm working more on a podcast than anything else. It's up, it's running. I've got 10 episodes in, and now I'm about to pivot and go away from a general overview of policing into investigations, into the forensic sciences. I kind of explain it to people like it's a civilian police academy, citizens police academy, but on steroids. I have a partner who's a well-known radio personality in Boston. We try to do it once a week. I'm a little behind because of some training stuff that I just had, but we'll be up and running. And again, I want to be informative. I want to educate people. And entertain may sound like the wrong word, but I want them to understand the way it really works. Because unfortunately, in this day and age, the police really don't control the narrative. And I think people have got an overview of us that's unfair. And we, the law enforcement, need to do a better job in bringing back communities together. It's kind of our role. But I also think if people understood what it really looks like, and what we do every single day, they'd have a different perspective on us. And so that's the purpose.
What's the name of your podcast?
It's the same as my website, actually. I try to keep it simple. So the website is www.powersonpolicing, all one word, .com. And the name of the podcast is simply Powers on Policing. Again, all one word. And the podcast is available on every major podcast platform. And I try to put it out on Tuesdays. And like I said, it hasn't always come out exactly the way I wanted it to, but that's on me. And it's like marketing the book, which was self-published. If it goes, it's because I did a good job marketing. If it doesn't, I didn't do a good job marketing. But and then from a writing point of view, I got a few things that I'm kicking around. There's a part of me I mean, I can't write fiction. Although if I could all of my unsolved homicides, I could solve them, right? And then I'd be very happy. But I, I think you write about what you know, and I know what I know, and that's to write, nonfiction. And I'm getting so many good reports from people who enjoyed the book and enjoyed the characters. Believe me, there's dozens of other cases, but a couple in particular that I could write about that would involve Adrian Lynch, would involve Duke Donahue, would involve. He was the brand new guy in the office at the time. He has now got my old job as the detective lieutenant, and is running. They're 18-0 this year, so I mean, you can't beat that for a record.
Wow.
At a time in this country when the solve rate is 54%. But it's all about collaboration. It's all about knowledge. It's working together. So I'm very, very proud of the work that my office in particular has done through the years and continues to do. And Adrian Lynch is still prosecuting homicide crimes.
Wow.
She was a homicide on this 25 years ago. Yeah, you know what I mean? We stay in touch. I started the other night, Duke as well. And there's some good stories there that I think people would enjoy. Again, it's the complexity of them and how what seemingly is impossible comes together, or a crime scene that seems implausible in one sense, and when you put it all together, it's like, of course.
So folks can get this book on Amazon for sure.
Yes,
Any other
right now
outlets?
it's available on Amazon, and there's a companion book that goes with it, but that is only available as an ebook, and that's called Murderous Rage. Because one of the things I pointed out in the book, and I wound up carving that out of this book because otherwise it was 500 pages, was in the midst of all this investigation. The day after Christmas, we had the largest mass murder in the history of Massachusetts, where a coworker murdered 7 of his coworkers, and we were on that case right away. And but I wanted to show people we're not one-trick ponies. You don't get a homicide that comes in and you've got that and you got nothing else on your plate, and this is all you work on. You work on what happens when it happens. And in fact, when the smoke cleared, the Malden had another homicide less than 2 weeks later. And I kind of pulled the detectives from Malden away. I had another group of people that worked on that investigation. So there's always this churning and changing. And so we had to investigate that case and bring that to a successful conclusion as well. But so that's 99 pages. I think it's free if you have Amazon Prime. I haven't looked in a while, but it's a good companion case to that, and again shows that it's a day-to-day, I guess, what makes us different or sets us apart is that kind of work, I think.
Right. And in fiction, it's one story. Yeah.
Like I love Bosch, I love Bosch, but our work environments are a little bit different. So
yes, absolutely. Well, I have to say, I think whether you're a true crime lover, a mystery writer, or a member of the law enforcement community, you'd absolutely love this book. I recommend it highly to everyone. And I thank you, Bill, for talking about it this morning with me. And I want to remind everybody, powersonpolicing.com. From there, you can find the podcast, and
you can click onto the podcast from the website. So yes, either way that you want to do it. Right.
Okay, so we're going to close here. Bill, thank you very much for your time and your expertise, and good luck with your future books, because I definitely will be looking for them.
Thank you, Sally. I really appreciate you having me on.